At the outset, thank you so much for showing up at such, or rather with such remarkably encouraging numbers. I aspire that these numbers persist through the day. And yeah, let's get started. A little more background perhaps about me, such that you have color about where I come from in the context of MTM. I joined the club in April 2018 and I've been going strong ever since. And what I'm going to speak today is simply a synthesis of everything I've learned. I promise you it is super basic, just fundamental stuff that I follow speech after speech, meeting after meeting. And the format of this is, I'll first present my deck where I will speak for about 25 to 30 minutes. The timer will let me know when to shut up. Followed by a 10-15 minute of Q&A. And last but not least, we have an exciting segment where all of you will engage in a story writing exercise, a 300-word story writing exercise from whatever you've learned. And Khushbu promises me that the top 3 will feature in the newsletter that will go out at the end of the month. So a lot of bragging rights there, the top 3. She first said only 1. I had to negotiate with her hard to increase that number to 3. So that will be towards the end. Now the way I've designed my deck is, instead of putting in points and speaking about it, I put questions that are most relevant to all of us, right? So there are questions and then I'll address those questions. And if I don't have the questions you have in mind, I'm happy to address them towards the end. Sounds good?
Yes.
Perfect. Yeah, Suraj, the first slide. How do I select a topic? Now, this is a perennial question we are plagued with. It's a question that I was plagued with when I was tasked with my icebreaker speech. And our first instinct is to look outside. We're looking outside ourselves for material, for content, for substance. We're looking outside ourselves for inspiration, right? How do I know this? Because I was there, and a lot of the mentees that I have, who are scattered amongst the audience, also follow this exercise where they look outside for content. They're looking at what the CEO of ChatGPT, or rather OpenAI, Sam Altman, said at New Delhi that provoked the CEO of Tech Mahindra, right? And they want to feature that in the speech. They're always looking outside, and there's nothing wrong to look outside, right? It's healthy. However, my mantra's always been simple, and that resides in the topic or the theme of my workshop, which is speak from within. I believe in looking inside for content, for material, for substance. I believe in the power of your personal story. I've delivered over 15 speeches in my 5-year tenure at MTM, and every story I've spoken about, I promise you every story, has been a personal story, has been something that's happened to me in my life, has impacted me, has shaped me, has changed my perspective towards things. And hence I believe in the power of a personal story. You see, there are 2 things about a personal story. One is, it's 100% original. If I speak about Sam Altman versus the Tech Mahindra CEO, chances are 50% of the people in the room have heard about it. So I've immediately excluded that 50% because you've read about it and you're like, man, why are you telling me the same thing over again? So I've plagiarized the room by 50%. Now, alternate that with your story. We heard 3 icebreakers today. None of them spoke about the outside world. All of them spoke about their personal stories. And we all just resonated with it, right? We all loved it. We even got emotional. I got emotional at quite a few of these stories. So that's the power of a personal story. You don't need to borrow from some author, from a movie. You just need to look within, because the inspiration lies within. So one reason you should always go for a personal story is it's 100% original, 0% plagiarism. No one's going to copy you. You're going to include everyone in it. Second is a more psychological reason, and that is you will never forget your speech. I get a lot of questions as to how do I remember or memorize my speech? How do I not forget my speech? Now, tell me this. We had 3 icebreakers. these guys, Vaishnavi, Radhika, Sandeep, spoke for the first time ever in their lives. Did they forget their speech? No, right? And why? Because all of them had their life on full display. Now, when you are speaking about your life story, vulnerably, honestly, authentically, you never forget it. You may at some point fumble and lose the words, but you'll find a way back because it's your story. You are the story. So there's no scope really of forgetting or missing. It's your life story. So for those reasons, which is 100% originality, and second, not forgetting or being unable to forget, is why I recommend personal stories. Now, I'm sure I will have a few rebels in the audience that will say, Mario may say, Jeevan, my life is boring. I have nothing to speak about. I just Netflix and chill all day. Then what? My solution to that is simple. I believe in this 3-circle effort where your first circle, when it comes to borrowing stories or taking stories, is your life. So that's your first circle. If you're like Mario and your life is boring, then you move to the second circle, which is friends and family. Right? I didn't consult Mario's. Forgive me, Mario. Don't take offense. You can get back to me at your session. But yeah, the first circle, like I said, is your life. You take from your life. The second circle is friends and family. We always have friends and family that we speak to, that we engage with, that we hear from, whose stories move us. So if you don't have, according to you, enough going on in your life, you move to that second circle, which is friends and family. And the last circle is your colleagues, which is your colleagues at work, if you're a working professional, or your schoolmates or college mates at college or school if you're studying. Now, that's the third circle. That is, if you don't have anything at all in your friends and family circle. So your first circle is your life. 99.9% you should have enough going on in your life, we all do, to speak about. The second circle is friends and family, and the last circle are your colleagues. So keep that in mind. I'll just shed some light to bolster my case about this point. Last week I spoke about brands. I'm not sure how many of you listened to my speech. I spoke about brands. Now, that's a topic that's been troubling me for a very long time. I've been nurturing it in my head forever. And I told myself the next time I'm given an opportunity to speak, I'll speak about brands. So literally that one topic that was in my head, impacting me, as Krishna said, I expressed it. It was I had all of his para and code in my head, nothing in paper. And I've been carrying it for a long time, and then I just bullet journaled it, so to speak, and I delivered it. So whenever you're looking for a topic, always look inside and always speak about your personal story, because the world doesn't know your personal story. The world deserves to know your personal story. And just as a person, you feel a lot better when you speak about yourself from your learning as opposed to someone else. So that is how I select a topic, and that's how I recommend selecting topics, which is always looking within a personal story and then you speak from within. The next one. How do I structure and organize my speech? Now this is some water. Just a minute. Thank you very much. Dimple's timely intervention. How do I structure and organize my speech? I've got a 4-point template for this. The first thing I do is I set the context. Very much in any business conversation or a conversation we have, we start by setting the context, and our first trainer, Krishna, did that brilliantly. He told us what we are doing, and he told us why we are doing it. He told us we are going to speak about journaling, and he told us why. He even laid out the objective. So when Krishna did that, when he set the context, he set the stage for what all of us can expect. And in any speech, and in fact not just speech, a written piece, when you're speaking to your boss, the first thing you do is you set the context. In fact, in our business, it's very common to reserve calendars of people. And oftentimes this happens without calling that person ahead. What I do as a matter of principle and priority is, I mention the agenda, and the agenda in a way sets the context. So whatever meeting it's going to be about, he or she comes ready, and so do I. I said we're going to speak about the sales review, we're going to speak about projections, and we're going to speak about the accounts that need to be retained. These are 3 bullet points, but these three bullet points essentially set the context before I dive in and expand on that context. It's essentially an anchor for your speech that tells the world where you're heading with your content. So that's the first, which is context, historical context. Second is personal story. Now, I'm not going to dwell much on personal story because that's in my upcoming slide. I'm going to double click on personal story because it deserves more love. But the source of personal story is something I've already covered. So the second aspect of your speech needs to be a personal story. You start with setting the context, which is laying down the agenda, so to speak, and you then supplement that with a personal story. The second last aspect is learning. What is your learning from your event or your life? And I'd like to borrow from Sandeep's speech here. He had a lovely speech, very much like everyone else. And he spoke about my learning in life was it's important to be the change you want to be in the world, right? Sandeep said, my dad had a business, I revolutionized my dad's business, I expanded my dad's business. That was the learning, and he called it out. And in fact, he even pushed that message to all of us. So once you've delivered your personal story, you then complement that with your learning. What is your learning? Because that learning needs to reflect. Oftentimes, I see that we deliver the story and not speak about the learning, not speak about the takeaway, almost keeping it a suspense. Don't do that because audiences tend to misinterpret. Whatever your story is, very much like Sandeep did, speak, call it out. That's important. So that is learning. Last but not least, call to action. Call to action is how do you provoke your audience into action, into thought. And how do you do that? The best way of doing that is asking yourself a question. Have you ever found yourself in a situation that I have? Have you ever been financially unchallenged? The moment you have provocative questions that you asked yourself in that situation and you push those questions to the audience, you get the audience thinking. And the answers to those questions lie in the learning. So your call to action essentially loops back to your learning. The point of a call to action is to push your audience or thrust them into action. Essentially, it's for them to execute. So to summarize, you start off with context, which is laying down the agenda. You move to your personal story. You then supplement that with learning. What is your message? And last but not least, call to action, which is a combination of questions and then a loop back to your learning. That is how I structure and organize my speech. Can we move to the next one? What are the properties of a good story? I mean, who better to exemplify this other than our Prime Minister? The reason I wanted to double click on this is because it's super, super, super important. Now, I follow 3 elements every time I narrate a story. Character or characters, dialogue between the characters, and emotion. I'll start by characters. Radhika in her speech alluded to this a bit where she said, my dad, my mom, and my elder brother. Now, she also described the dad, the mom, and the elder brother. The moment you introduce characters to your speech, you build empathy within the audience. We all have a dad, we all have a mom, we all have an elder brother, elder sister, younger brother, younger sister. And I'm immediately taken to my dad, my mom, my elder brother, right? And I'm looking, because as an audience member, you're looking for common ground with whoever's on stage, with the speaker on stage. And the moment you build characters, and you have a variety of characters, dad, mom, brother, myself, you build an audience between, or rather you build a relationship between the characters and the audience. That's the power of introducing characters. Additionally, and more importantly, when you introduce characters, the audience tends to view your speech or your experience through the eyes of the characters. I've always, for instance, if I say my dad was from the army, a 6'5" guy, disciplined, super hard, always put me to test. The image I'm sending out is one of a man who's tough on the world and tough on his son. Similarly, if I move back to my mom and say, my mom on the other hand was soft, she was a homemaker, She thought from her heart, unlike my mom, unlike my dad rather, who thought from his head. I've then contrasted that with another character who's just the opposite. Now you have two views of the world given these characters. And it's important because every story isn't a unidimensional story. Every story is a multi-dimensional story. It's very much like that story is about me, it's about the other characters in the story. And when you introduce characters, you help the audience look at your world from different eyes. And like I said, you help build resonance and empathy between the characters. Second is dialogue, which is dialogue within the characters. Now, a lot of us do this already, but what we got to do is actually settle into it 100%. What do I mean by that? We always say, my dad said this, to which my mom said this, and then I said something. That's the way we usually go about it. What we need to do is truly entrench ourselves into the characters. What I mean is, you become the dad. You raise your voice. Jeevan, I'd like you to join me at the garage. Help me with my car. That's the dad. I then change characters to my mom. You know what? You're so bossy. You keep pulling him into your personal projects. Let him be. Let him study. That's another character. Now, what I did here was I introduced two people in two different voices. You resonate with these people. And it's almost always better when you do that, because what happens is I've taken my audience to my world. If I simply narrated it with one voice sitting in one place, or rather standing in one place, it's monotonous rather. But when I get into the shoes of my characters, get into the boots and the skin of my characters, with the voice, with the build, with the baritone, I have taken you successfully to my world. I've transported you to that point in time that incident actually occurred. And that's why dialogue between the characters is super important. So we start with characters, and then we move to dialogue. Last but not least, emotion. Now, if characters run speeches, characters and dialogues run speeches, emotions truly run our lives. We're all emotional beings, and we all respond to emotion. With emotion, all I'll say is this. Whenever you're narrating a story, especially on stage, narrate it like you're narrating it to your best friend. Narrate it like you're narrating it to your family member. What I mean is, if while narrating the story, you're feeling really low, that needs to reflect in your voice, that needs to reflect in your body language. You shouldn't be objective about it. You should actually get into the character in that moment and narrate the story. The idea is to translate to the audience exactly what you're feeling. I've seen a lot of people get really emotional on stage, and that is something I appreciate, because they are 100% original, right? There are people that cry on stage. There are people that lose their trail of thought because the topic is so sensitive, and that's fine. In fact, that's appreciated, because you've almost made the audience your friend, your best friend, and nothing beats that. Nothing beats having an emotional friend in the audience. So whatever your speech is, and this is especially true when it comes to speeches, because table topics and speech evaluations, you have to be objective. Whether you're in character or outside character, manifest the emotion that the character is truly going through, because that's when you'll truly capture the audience's mind and their hearts. So what are the properties of a good speech? Character, dialogue, and emotion. Awesome. Can you move to the next one? How do I master delivery? Now, do we know the guy on screen? Yes. He happens to be an uncle of someone in the room. Any guesses? Mario. Someone said Mario. Mario's from Singapore. I'm just kidding. Krishna. That someone has told me to keep it secret, so I'll let that be the treasure hunt after the meeting. You'll figure who he is. But I've told that someone to get this gentleman to a meeting to enlighten us. Coming back, how do I master delivery? This is perhaps the simplest, because I've had this conversation with several people. My way is make a note of all the people that truly inspire you. Inspire you in the field of communication, business communication, public speaking. Make a note of these people and listen to them and watch them on loop. Listen to them and watch them on repeat. Someone I've been looking up to, or rather, looking up to recently is Dr. Shashi Tharoor. He's a man I truly, truly admire. And I've been listening to at least 3 hours of content of him for the past 3 weeks. What happens when you listen to someone you truly look up to? It doesn't need to be him, it can be whoever. It can be Dimple, it can be Namrata, it can be Krishna, it can be Mario. What happens is you pick up on the subtle nuances of the way they deliver, of the way they speak. And when you do that, you reflect, or rather you represent them. There's this saying that you are the average of the 5 people you hang out with. Have you heard of that?
Yeah.
That's exactly what happens here. When you're listening to someone way too much, you sound like them. In fact, there's a study done. If you've been roommates or flatmates with someone for too long, you actually sound a lot like them. I had these 2 colleagues at work who laughed the exact same way, and I told them this. But the point I'm trying to make is, the more you spend time with someone like him or whoever you look up to, the more you sound like them. I promise you won't sound exactly like them. You need to be an impression artist to do that. But the way you speak, the way you deliver, you will recognize the nuances of impactful delivery, how to speak, how to articulate, and all of that. I was having this conversation with Tanay, and Tanay looks up to Shah Rukh Khan, right? And Tanay also listens to a lot of Shah Rukh Khan. And you may or may not see this both in Tanay's attitude and his voice. But yeah, it works. It works because, as Pablo Picasso said, right, good artists copy, great artists steal. And there's no better people to learn from than the best in the business. In this case, according to me, he's the best in the business. And I'll give you some brownie points if you're able to recognize what traits I've picked up from him, but that is after the meeting. Awesome. So that's pretty much it. Dimple, can we move to the next slide, which is Q&A? How are we on time? Awesome. I'm done with my presentation. These are the questions that I had, that I felt you all would have. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them now.